Thanks to movies like Apollo 13, Independence Day, and the hotness that CGI became in the mid-90s, movie after disaster movie flooded theaters and TVs. Some would be popcorn flicks with very little substance. Things like Deep Impact and Armageddon came out at the same time. It's where Bay and Bruckheimer built up their reputations. A cool concept, but they usually didn't have a solid human element. Many of them would do good money-wise, but their stories were crap. There's one thing to make a cool action film, it's another to just show off. I really think these films would have been good films if they weren't trying to one-up each other with CGI. I wanted to go back and see most of Bruckheimer's produced films. Did I miss something that was good? Are they still crummy movies after all these years? Then I remembered a TV movie he produced in '98 called Max Q Emergency Landing. At the same time Armageddon was being done. It focused on a crew of astronauts trying to land safely back on Earth after the disaster happened on board. I know what you're thinking, it sounds like Apollo 13. It's very similar and it can easily be a sequel to that film. Max Q comments on the various problems NASA has been going through over the years, showcasing how boring and nonchalant space travel's gotten to the public. The crews are not faring well either. The evolution of computer systems making things cheaper while taking more and more control away from their pilots. This is where Max Q did a win over Armageddon. Here, the movie focuses on four main characters. The first two, Clay Jarvis and Scott Hines, 10-year veteran astronauts. They joined the program to fly into space and do grand missions, when in reality they end up being a glorified delivery service with controls being more automated. Both were in a simulator test dealing with scenarios that they couldn't correct, thanks to manual controls not able to get them out of it. Jarvis and Hines built up a lot of tension between the NASA bosses and a colleague, Rena Winter. She means well and worked on the computer systems, but she's gotten extremely cocky and takes too much pride in her system. They feel like glorified button pushers. This is something interesting. NASA's always looked at as this amazing organization, but the public really hasn't cared about space travel in decades. Why would we? You go up there, you do your thing in space, and that's it. It's more complicated than an office worker, but it's still the same idea. Out of sight, out of mind. Clay starts feeling wasted. That 10 years he put into training, not needed. Renee makes it worse. His car doesn't start, she fixes it, and she doesn't understand Hines and Clay's feelings at all. And it gets progressively worse. His crew of the Space Shuttle Endeavour gets chosen to have a routine go up and drop of a new satellite from KSAT, TV phone service satellite. KSAT thought it'd be cool for publicity to make a mini documentary on the satellite, and since they're fitting NASA's bills, Clay's forced to bring Jonah Randall with him. Ah yes, a civilian that barely has any training, not to mention stuck up. He's won some Emmys on a video he did in Iraq. Great, you went into a deadly area and exposed something important. You don't have to shove it in people's faces. The anger Clay has is an understatement. He got a job, but still. The rest of the crew is also dealing with some issues. Hines is having a baby, his wife wants him to stop, but it's not fair to him, so both of them don't know what to do or how to feel. Endeavour's fourth crew member, Karen Daniels, trusted friend to the captain, has a family, including Teal'c's son, Ryak, when he's not on Stargate. Just doing her job, she doesn't like pointing out she's one of the few women astronauts. It's just no big deal to her and her family. Remember that documentary video Jonah needs to do? He's at the night party, makes a fool of himself. I think they did it on purpose. The public doesn't care about space. Who cares about doing the documentary? These are the little things Michael Bay and Bruckheimer movies fail most of the time. We have clear leads to follow. Each one has their personalities. They have goals and wants. They're human beings and not plot devices or stereotypes. And it's thanks to it being a TV budget. We can't afford lots of explosions or CGI, so we gotta write a story and characters that are motivated through an arc. Let me quickly answer what Max Q means. It's the apex part of a shuttle launch where the speed and air pressure reach their highest point on the vehicle. The shuttle has to throttle down in order to pass through the air without taking damage. It's a very fine balance of survival. Too much, you'll stall and fall. Too little, get ripped apart. Which is what the film is all about. It's trying to make money from using companies that need to put stuff into orbit, but retain their exploration and discovery goals. Clay wants to be a part of NASA for the recognition and exploration, but is forced to do parcel jobs for Professor Oak. The title looks random, but they put thought into it. What causes the disaster? It's not the shuttle or anything the crew caused. They launch. Jonah whines like a kid as the ship pushes his butt into orbit. They get to space fine. Jonah annoys everyone with his camera, but they muzzle through it. The film does a decent job at being realistic with the space stuff. Small things like stars not being visible because the sun is too bright. The figurehead for KSAT is really up himself, congratulating the design and how it will help millions of people. It gets released from the cargo bay, but one of the solar panels fails to deploy. Without it fully extended, the module gets no power, can't hold orbit, turning it into a $100 million waste of time. Here comes the stupid. NASA suggests a small burn to shake the panel loose. Clay wants to do EVA repaired or just, bail, cut their losses. Everyone argues, and I'm going, wait, small burn? I don't care how little you do it. The thruster on the satellite is on the bottom. It's going to move up. How does moving up make a solar panel that opens from the bottom to the top pop out? That would just close it. The KSAT guy makes them do the small burn, which ended up being a fireball. There was some sort of short near one of the thrusters. Jonah noticed it at the last minute, but it was too late. When the engine fired, it probably ignited all the fuel in it. The satellite was probably 100 feet above the cargo bay. It destroyed the arm, burned the entire back section. The force threw the ship out of control, knocking everyone around. Jonah smashed his face. Karen tried to help him, while the two guys got the shuttle back under control. Say goodbye to the satellite, whizzing away in space. No one knows what happened. No one really cares. They just want to get home, so they try to start the configuration for landing when all three APU backup engines fail. No power to run the landing system, no way to get back home. The burn destroyed the hydraulic systems. A fire broke out in a section of the ship. They tried to bypass some systems to test APU-3. Nothing worked. And while this was all going on, the KSAT guy made Jonah record footage or to try to get someone to admit it was NASA's fault and not theirs. He's dealing with that, doesn't even know if he'll make it back, and the guy is like, I don't care. Here, we'll record the footage from down here. This guy is beyond garbage. Doesn't give a crap about Jonah or anything else but his reputation. This is when Jonah starts changing his tune towards the crew. For once, he understood not to think about himself, but also consider everyone else. The crew was throwing out ideas on fixing the problem to the point in rushing another shuttle launch in 2 days when they need 5 weeks to ready it. The captain did not want to risk anyone else's lives. He wanted to figure out a way to fix the APUs, but not everyone felt the same way. Scott broke down and demanded the second shuttle to be sent. He was thinking about his unborn kid, and I understand that, but he completely ignores Daniels, who has a family worrying about her. She knows her son is sitting at mission control, unable to do anything, while their spaceship slowly runs out of power. Isn't it great when the characters act normal during a crisis and not make testicle jokes? Clay knows he needs help on the ship. Who else better than Rena? The whole thing about them is that they both like each other. They didn't want to say it, so they went into this pissing contest. He couldn't ask her out. She found this other guy. He got mad at what she was doing, so she made the simulations harder. So both of them acted like 16-year-olds. What they needed to do is figure out how to get APU-3 to work. That required Clay to do an EV run outside. It's damaged, has sharp objects that could puncture the suit. He didn't want to risk anyone else out there. Fuel could still be floating in the area and could ignite if he used his cutter. This is the weakest point of the film. They manufactured a ticking clock that didn't work. It's very obvious. A lot of things add to the tension. They don't know if the engines are leaking. They had problems getting the APU engine to work, period. The casing was cracked, so they had to make a crappy seal. Then Clay cuts his suit open. He only has 4 minutes of oxygen remaining. And you go, all right, let him head back to the airlock and get another suit. He has more than enough time. For some reason, this doesn't happen. They act like they must repair the engine before a deadline, but they don't have one. The ship has 2 days before it hits the atmosphere and burns up. That's established with the canned rescue mission. They don't have an oxygen problem like Apollo 13. You might be thinking, what about the hydraulic fluid of the engine when they opened it? Well, a ton of it floated out and they seemed to not care, so there was nothing stopping Clay to go back, get the second suit, then finish it off. If they had covered these mistakes, it would have been a good tense scene. They even have Clay cut off the outer layer of his gloves because they were soaked in hydraulic fluid. There's really no way to defend this plot hole. They do get one APU to work, but it's a crapshoot in landing the shuttle with one. The shuttle looks like an airplane, but it's more like a falling brick. It's moving at greater speeds and is much heavier to fly in any practical way. That's why a regular airplane is used to move shuttles around. Because of the damage and less power, they're forced to fly over LA, giving a nod to Independence Day, missing the US Bank Tower, and use a highway to land on, coming to a hard stop, jamming the shuttle under a bridge. I gotta say, the ending of the film was cooler than Apollo 13's ending. But I will knock off another piece of goodwill. The way the movie wraps up is Jonah tells his boss to shove it, quits, and tells everyone the satellite was the cause of the disaster. KSAT dude got fired, but Jonah did get his new Porsche and a new job. Karen and Scott get boned. They get no payoff at the end. But Clay and Rena, after all this, after her help saving his life, as the sun sets, they get together. Ah, that good old riding into the sunset moment. Nothing can be any... Wait a minute. Didn't she like another guy, so she just threw him away like nothing? Way to go, movie. Both of them are still pricks. The movie isn't flawless. It has too much story to tell with very little time, but I think it's one of the best Bruckheimer movies they did. I wanted to see more of NASA, what type of stuff they had to deal with. Each of the main characters got a turning moment where they all worked together. None of them acted like superheroes. It's okay, we'll just do this, this, and this, and we're out of the problem. They had to face a life and death situation. The secondary characters like Karen and Scott's family were decently used, unlike the mess the 9 writers threw out in Armageddon. The movie is actually available to find on DVD. It's rare, but it was released in the UK, plus was released in its original widescreen aspect ratio. Give it a shot. It's way better than Armageddon ever was. Thanks for checking out the video. Subscribe if you want to see more from me, and if you remember a movie or a show that's long been forgotten, good or bad, leave it as a suggestion below. I'm always on the lookout for obscured stuff.